course, right when you want technology to work, it doesn't work. So I will keep my introduction short. We welcome everybody to this discussion about SeedFacts, and we have a lot of our members who are experts in the area of seed production, breeding, distribution, selling, all of that. And I thank our members for being on our panel. And a quick introduction here. We're going to go through our panelists. We'll start with Janine. Janine Bogard is the business lead for Home and Garden Vegetables. With this echo, I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves.
Okay, I'm Janine Bogard, at the Flowers, and I manage the Home and Garden Vegetable Program here. I'm also Vice President on the National Garden Bureau Board.
I'll go next. So, hi, I'm Nick Pucci. I'm the East Marketing Manager for Seminus Vegetable Seeds. I'm also the President of the National Garden Bureau Board of Directors.
I'm Curtis Jones, and I am a co-founder, co-president of Botanical Interest, along with Judy Seaborn down below there.
I'm Judy Seaborn, co-owner of Botanical Interests, seed packet and online company.
My name is Marissa Verdi. I'm one of the vice presidents at Harris Seeds. I have a primary focus in home garden, marketing, and managed services. And along with Nick and Janine, I serve as a member of the board for National Garden Bureau.
I'm Dave Melhorn. I'm the CEO of Johnny Selected Seeds.
Nathan Zondag. I'm vice president of operations in the seed company.
Diane, you're on mute.
Famous words, right?
Yeah.
So I will start with the questions, but it looks like if more than one of us have a microphone on at a time, we're going to get some echoing. So might be a little difficult, but try to remember to turn your microphone off, except when you're speaking. And the plan today was to talk through the seed industry. And obviously that starts with the seed breeders. There's our panelist. And they were going to take turns talking about how it's a global market and a very regulated market. So Janine and Nick, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I'll let you start, Janine.
Yeah. You said you were going to start it off?
No, I can start it off. So for vegetable seeds, we sell roughly 20 crops across 2,000 varieties in over 120 countries. So obviously there's some complexity in the regulatory and logistics to bring those seeds to all of our customers around the world. You know, we want to ensure that we're growing the best seeds that we produce in the areas where we feel like we can get the most out of our seed production facilities, and then we transport that seed across the globe into our manufacturing facilities to sanitize, to size, to test, and then to package and distribute out to our distributors. So just, you know, to kind of lay out the environment, you know, you can see the complexity and how all the local and international laws can start to really impact the overall supply of seed in each of the individual areas. And that's just an overview from my standpoint with regards to vegetable seed.
Okay, and then for both, we do both flowers and vegetables, and it is a global production, and we contract grow across the world, depending on where the best environment is to grow that particular crop. So what we're finding is that each individual country has their own set of regulations. So as the seed is moved from country to country, as it finally gets to, for us, the US, it may touch several different points of entry, and each country has its own set of regulations. So what's happening right now, it's a very regulated market, especially for import into the United States. And USDA and APHIS has really started to clamp down on a lot of pathogens that they're very concerned about, especially when it comes to the Solanaceae crops. So there's a lot of inspections going on. There's a lot of spot inspections coming on when things come into the port of entry, in which case that will delay seed shipments around as it gets dispersed across the country. I did chat with USDA last week, and just a heads up for anyone with a seed vault, they are going to be stepping up their inspections. So be prepared for them when they do show up. When you move seed across the country, each state also has its own set of regulations, which a lot of people aren't aware of. And with that becomes another level of complexity of being compliant with the various seed laws. And the state inspectors, each state has its own set of rules in addition to the federal regulations that are in place. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes in order to assure that there's quality seed coming into the marketplace. And each time someone touches it or looks at it, it could potentially delay seed getting into the market. Okay.
Janine?
Yeah.
My seed buyers have also said that there's a backlog of boats just floating on the ocean that can't even get through customs. Is that true?
Yes, that is. And I attended ASTA, and they talked about that at, was it 2 weeks ago, that there was 30 ships offshore. And actually on the news, in national news that night, they showed that on a drone, and all those boats are there. What's happening is that, and that was just Long Beach or San Diego. And then you got all the other ports of entry. So the ship workers, or the people who unload the ships, are being impacted by COVID. They can't get in there to offload the ships, and there's a bunch of other things. And then if it's something that needs to be inspected, again, the inspectors are being impacted by COVID regulations. So there's this huge backlog of things just getting through points of entry right now. And then you threw those storms down in Texas and FedEx and everything this last week or so, and it's just painful. It's just painful. But yes, it's very true about shipping containers coming over. And then so a lot of people are diverting their shipments and putting them on aircraft, which is another bottleneck on top of that. So it just, a lot of it's related to COVID at this point.
There is one question here. And sorry, Nick, if you address this, some of the specifics, like where is a lot of the seeds produced in volume, whereabouts in the country, and then also in the US, where are the biggest seed producing regions?
So I'm more of an expert around tomatoes, and for tomatoes, we produce mainly in Asia, so Thailand and India, and we do that because of the the dry, warm environment and limited amount of disease pressure in those areas. And so we contract grow. I mean, we can grow up to 50,000 kilos in that region alone. And then when you look across the Pacific Northwest, we have a lot of our large seed production going on for sweet corn and some other crops in that area. Also, carrots and onions are coming out of the PNW. So we have production in a lot of different areas. And like I said, we at Bayer, we operate around 20 crops, which translates into around 2,000 varieties within those crops. So you can, and we produce all over the globe, and we have manufacturing facilities all over the globe as well. One of our main ones in Oxnard, California, and Birchenhoek, Netherlands, and then other ones scattered around. So hopefully that answers the question. I gave a little bit more specifics on tomatoes, but I don't have all the details around some of the other crops. Maybe some others have some examples there.
Yeah, China's an up and coming for seed production also. South America for flower seed in particular, a lot of that's coming out of Guatemala, Costa Rica, those areas. Chile, Turkey, India. So it's pretty much dispersed around the world. And it really depends on whether you're northern or southern hemisphere too, because sometimes you'll put crops in both hemispheres so that you have year-round production coming in. So it just all depends.
Great. Yes, I think that answered the question. So how about now if we move over to our retailers, and you guys can talk about what happens now that we've talked to the breeders and we know where a lot of the seed is produced. Maybe you guys can give a little rundown on the steps it takes from the time a big old pallet of seed comes in all the way through till it goes into the specific envelopes or boxes to send out to your customers. And I'll just let you guys take over from here, and I'll let you have it.
Add a little more about where seed comes from too. We do a lot of proprietary custom crops for our organic seed. And a lot of that is done in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Utah, to add that piece. So a lot of it is US and California.
I'll let Judy talk about the production part of it with botanical interest. I'm more on the retail, selling to the retail stores part, so I'll let her discuss that part of it.
Yeah, seed coming in, we germ test it, locate it, and get it ready for getting a run sheet put together, package it as quickly as we can. A lot of seed packet companies are limited by what machinery they have and what their process is for packing. I know a lot of people still do a lot of hand packing. I'm lucky enough to have a number of machines to keep it all moving quickly. So I know a lot of the seed packet companies are having trouble keeping up with demand simply because they don't have the capacity to pack. Let somebody else speak.
And I can definitely kind of piggyback off of what Judy was saying. Simply put, we'll obviously put together a purchase order with companies, like Janine and Nick were talking about with Seminus and Syngenta. The seed ultimately arrives at our dock, and it's pretty common. That kind of triggers multiple events. As Judy was mentioning, we send a sample immediately off to the germ lab. We have USDA certified technicians on staff who will basically undergo the germination testing. Subsequently, at the same time that bulk seed arrives to our packaging department, in advance forecasts are put together. And we are fortunate here at Harris Seeds, we not only support home garden, but also professional grower business. So we put up multiple sizes, and we too also have automated packaging equipment. So it really just depends on the demand of the forecast for that product and the placement of that product. But it'll basically go through the assemblies. And once the assemblies are complete, we have a team of people who actually put the finished good product out on the shelves in our warehouse. And then, of course, as orders come through into our system, those now become pickable items, and then they go through our line of fulfillment. So they'll be added to an order. There's a scan out process to ensure QC and that, everything that was ordered is also in that package. It gets shipped out. And then, just like everyone else, we have our trucks come in and out of our building frequently to collect the orders. So it sounds like, probably most of our companies operate in a very similar way, but as Judy was mentioning, the real key there is the packaging and whether or not you have any type of automation in place there. That can be the real differential.
I would say
our circumstances, basically what everyone else has explained. After we pull our Q lot, so we put some aside so that we can test it and have some later, just in case we need to go back and trace a lot for any issues that could develop. We generally move everything into seed coolers, into our deep seed coolers, so that we try to keep the health of the seed as consistent as we can. And then, while we forecast what we think the demand is going to be, and like Marissa said, we pre-pack to that demand. Certainly the last 2 years, that's been a really difficult process. So we try to keep it in the cooler as long as we can and pull it as we know we're going to fulfill orders over the next few weeks.
I would say our process is very similar to what's been talked about here. Seed comes in, it gets tested and stored in our climate humidity controlled cooler. It's packaged between we do package some stuff by hand, but most of it's packaged on equipment. And yeah, basically the same thing as everybody else has been saying.
Okay, great. So I think the question that is on everybody's mind that we would like for you to address, and I'm sure everybody would like to speak up, but basically, is there a seed shortage, or is there something in the supply chain, or is it COVID related? You know, can you talk about what is perceived to be a shortage that is happening right now?
Just a real quick comment. Some numbers I saw last season were that there were 9 million new vegetable gardeners, and that the season basically started in March because that's when COVID hit. And this year, my opinion is that there are going to be even more. I don't know if there's seed shortages or not. That's probably a question for Judy or someone else. I do know that the demand is way up.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that on the production side with the breeders, I'm doing 3-year forecasts. So a lot of what I'm predicting what's going to be in the market today was forecasted 3 years ago. And then some of these crops can take anywhere from 9 months to 2 years to produce. So a lot of times you're looking into your crystal ball and you're kind of taking a guesstimate as what's going to happen in the marketplace. But if you really follow what's going on in the marketplace, you know where to adjust your forecast. If you have a feeling, it's kind of like you just get a feeling for it after a while. You do this after a number of years, where you think the growth potential is going to be on it. And then you just need to make sure that you put in forecasts for that growth. So I wouldn't necessarily say that there's a seed shortage out there, but there's plenty of seed to go around. It may not necessarily be in the specific variety that someone is looking for at that moment in time.
And
I would agree with that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to simply say, from the retailer side of things, I mean, just simply put, it's not a seed shortage as much as it's a throughput issue. It's a throughput shortage. You know, as we all kind of detailed, there's numerous steps that take place on the retail side, from receiving in the seed to the seed packaging to the germ lab to the fulfillment, and it's labor. And so, you know, hearing that even on the breeder side of it, you're experiencing that same amount of labor. And then, you know, even as Curtis was mentioning, just with such increased demand, our forecasts are off, the breeders' forecasts are off. And so, you know, you walk into the warehouse and our warehouse is full of seed, but definitely the consumer flexibility has to be there, because that particular variety that they may want may be in question, but we can guarantee you we have lots of other varieties to substitute for that.
I agree with Janine's comment about the forecasting has been very difficult, because I do a 3-year forecast also, and I use a crystal ball and a magic wand, and it still is not working. But yeah, so I'm almost worried about next year's season, because as Janine was saying too, the biennials are getting just hammered on demand. Carrots are going to be hard to come by, I'm afraid.
Yeah, at Johnny's, you know, there's a few shortages on a few varieties here and there. Like the others have mentioned, we're not experiencing a seed shortage. You know, right now, our situation is we probably have 20% more seed than we had this same time last year, but it is a throughput issue. So that really spike in home garden demand that can be very labor intensive, you know, shipping a lot of orders, packing a lot of seed, that happened in March last year. And it kind of continued through the summertime. That home garden purchasing period for a retailer like us is traditionally kind of mid-February to mid-April is where it peaks. I think everyone's experience last year made them place their orders early. That pulled those orders in and really overlapped them with the period where the you know, local farmers across the states tend to buy. Certainly in the South and in the West, they're growing all the time, but in the northern part of the country, they're really ordering traditionally the middle of December to the middle of February, but it put both of those groups of customers in our circumstance trying to order in the same period, and that just made it really difficult to keep up with the ordering process. And I think that was everyone kind of getting caught in the spin cycle last March and trying to get in early and creating basically earlier in the year.
We have, David, seen a increase in orders earlier. I agree with you that people are ordering earlier. A number of our online customers had mentioned that I am placing my order earlier this year in January instead of in February because I don't want to get caught like I did last year in the crunch where, packet companies were shutting down. So we are seeing definitely an earlier group of home garden buyers online and as well as with the rack sales for retail outlets.
I just saw a question pop up on the screen about where we think the growth will be in the next 5 to 10 years. And I'd just like to make a quick comment. I service a couple of garden centers myself because I just like to know what's going on in the field. And it's very obvious to me that the average age of gardeners now has dropped considerably. A lot of young people are now getting into the market. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see more interest in organics and that along that line because of that age increase or decrease.
I guess I'd just like to reiterate that the seed shortage is more of a misnomer. It's not so much a seed shortage. Of the roughly 2,400 varieties of seeds that we're selling currently, there's only 83 that are out of stock. The vast majority of them we still have available for our customers and should have throughout the season. It's just an issue of being able to fill the packets fast enough to get them to the customers in adequate time.
That kind of goes along with my next question. And you can tell that I put this slide together with these questions in my mind, was because I think we're all on the same page that it's not necessarily the seed that you can't get. Was there something else vital to your business that you were unable to get? I mean, to me, I'm looking at all the Amazon deliveries and all the cardboard boxes that are being used. Is there a shortage on boxes or packaging, or is it labor? And I'm sure you're going to say all of the above, but do you have some specifics on that?
Yes.
For us, I was going to say for us at Harris, it's labor is the number one. And I think that's a further question, but just what's the number one issue? It's labor, truthfully, unemployment in particular, and just the regulations around that and, incentivizing people to not work when they could show up to work has definitely been the factor. We also just, again, you talk about COVID and human health. Anytime anyone even has a sniffle, we go into, hyper alert. We have, protocols and actions in play. Whether or not our local community is experiencing a surge may make our, the majority of our staff go remote at any given time. So for us, it's just how you balance that human health aspect. And of course, if you did have a COVID case, God forbid, how that affects the department that person may have been in or may have cross-contaminated with. So certainly in that regards, you're talking about increased demand in product and something that, can still relatively be labor intensive, even if you do have automated machinery and automation in play. And I'm sure I'm speaking for many companies in that regards, but as far as packaging and equipment goes, we haven't had like a cardboard issue or a tape issue. Certainly, there's been some holdups, they're behind as well. But, when we started to see this surge last year, we went ahead and ordered way more packages than we could probably go through in the season, but just to make sure we had that on the dock so that we would be ready to go. But labor is one of those unpredictable pieces.
I'd second that. Yeah, labor is probably the biggest issue that we have right now. We have like I said, we have vast majority of seed, but finding people in a small rural community like we're in to come in and do all the labor that needs to be done, it has been very difficult, especially with everybody being frightened of COVID, understandably so, but it just makes it much more difficult to get everything done that needs to be done.
I would echo that. We changed a lot of our operating processes to spread people out more, even inside of seed packing and warehousing and shipping. And our productivity kind of per person moving through the facility has slowed down as a result of some of those precautionary efforts. We too had some difficulty hiring people. We're in a rural area as well. We really needed to expand our staff to meet the demand and kind of operate the business into the evening and over the weekends into portions of the week that we normally hadn't. So all of that exacerbated things a little bit. We carry about 2,000 varieties as well, and only about 136 of them are out of stock right now. And a good portion of those are ones that are new varieties that we added last year that we are having a little difficulty getting crops in. Normally, you know, fresh seed of new varieties that we've introduced would come in December, January. We always have some that end up coming in February and March. They may be getting processed overseas or cleaned overseas, or coming through customs. But some of the supply chain slowdown has prevented us from actually getting the varieties that we decided to bring into the product portfolio last year actually available to customers this year.
So another question I have is it only vegetables, or are you seeing this on vegetables and herbs and annuals and perennials? If you guys want to address that question.
Just a quick comment. Judy knows more about the inventory than I do, but last year it was vegetables, period. The flowers were, you know, they sold, but it wasn't a big deal. This year, it's both.
Yeah, organic vegetables have still been our biggest area of growth, but I agree, vegetables and flowers have picked up more. And to add what you're talking about, labor, I'm very protective about our employees. I'm a mother hen about it, probably. And it has slowed down production because, like Dave was saying, trying to implement COVID safety procedures and spreading people out, I probably could have added more people to the warehouse and got more out the door, but just to keep everybody safe, you don't want to do that. So it's a catch 22.
I guess I can add to this a little bit here, since we do everything from rose bushes, fruit trees, seeds, everything's up. Our rose sales are up like 60 to 70%. Our vegetable seeds are up 100%. Everything is way up this year. It's not just vegetables, it's fruits, it's flowers, it's everything.
I would like to reiterate that since I go into a couple of the retailers myself, when I talk to the employees there, it is everything that they're short on. It's something that they just have to deal with. They're expecting a huge year this year, and they're buying as much as they can, but a lot of it isn't that available. That includes pottery and everything else.
Diane, one of the questions earlier was about the market channels. And I sell into 3 different areas in the channel. So I'm selling to bedding plant, or eventually we get to bedding plant growers. We go to what I call the catalog companies who do online sales. And then you got the retail rack sales with some people refer to as packet seed. And each of those market channels has a different set of needs and wants and requirements. And so I don't see them necessarily all blending in together, but they're going to run parallel with each other. And some will run faster than others. But I do not see a consolidation with the bedding plant market, with the packet seed market. The needs are and requirements are so different. And I just don't see that happening. I see consolidation within those channels, but I don't see cross consolidation among the different channels. Does that make sense? And then there was one other question about the seed coming in unsolicited into the United States. And actually, USDA APHIS this week released some protocols and some recommendations for online sellers and buyers. And it's illegal for them to ship it in. For one thing, they need to have an import permit, or the buyer at this end has to have an import permit, and then the seller at the other end has to supply a phytosanitary certificate, and that is not happening. And that's why the government is so concerned about what's being brought into this country illegally, and really requesting that people turn those suppliers in so that we can protect our own marketplace and a phytosanitary aspect of it.
And the question also had to do with the unsolicited seeds that came in from China. So I think you addressed that. And so, Janine, it does sound like USDA just came out with something new, because I think a lot of people on this meeting here would want to know what kind of advice should they give to people who are trying to order seeds. You know, how do you know that an online seed seller is legit and has quality products? Anybody can comment on that one.
I'd be very leery of purchasing something from someone overseas for the home garden market. I think you're better off staying with someone here stateside, because everything will be on the up and up, you know. Yeah.
And one of our, you know, the reasons why we started this conversation was to help, you know, direct consumers to our members. As National Garden Bureau, you know, we really vet our members, and we look at them as experts. So, you know, when you're thinking about directing consumers to, you know, the right suppliers, I would look at, you know, our membership and just really focus on those suppliers that are reputable and ones that are, you know, like Janine said, within the United States, and source seed from, you know, the right channels in order to have all that documentation in place, that we've all done that hard work on the back end to make sure that that is quality seed and that it, you know, will perform the way that you want it to perform.
Yeah, and just to echo that, I mean, certainly using the National Garden Bureau website, recently there's been some really fantastic blog articles that kind of go through, you know, what are the key things to look at when you're, you know, on a company's website. And then certainly if you actually make a purchase, you know, seed should never be shipped to you in a Ziploc bag. Seed should always be, you know, proper packaging. You should see the variety name listed on the package. You should see a germination label, or at the very least a packed for season date within the same year that you're purchasing the seed. And yeah, if you see things like they produce a catalog, they have a website, they have a social media presence, they have an active customer base, an engaged base, like those are all very good signs to make sure that you're buying from someone, you know, very reputable.
There was a question about safety protocols, and I was just going to make a comment that one of the things we did is we have 2 shifts instead of 1 now, so we can kind of spread people out.
In our case, you know, like Marissa said, we've really encouraged employees to be open with us about any illness that they see starting up, and we've set up some different mechanisms for them to report illness when they're in work, out of work, and we quickly work with them to make sure they don't bring something into the workplace. We are doing temperature checks for everyone on their way into work every morning. Everyone is masked. Everyone has workstations that now have been separated. Half of our employees are working remotely in the warehouse facility where the seed packing and shipping is going on. We broke it up into 3 shifts. They're working in circumstances where they're separated out, even as they do those operations. I don't know if people are familiar with FFCRA. So if an employee becomes sick and it's somehow related to a COVID contact, they don't lose their pay. So, you know, we work with all of those mechanisms to really keep people safe. And we've been super fortunate so far. But it's something that you really have to be really rigorous about maintaining every day.
We also do safety protocols at botanical interests, temperature checks, hand washing when you come in the building. At break, you wash your hands again. When you come back from break, you wash your hands again. Everything is wiped down before the second shift comes in. There's a 30-minute break between shifts so that they never commingle. We actually did have a COVID scare here. We had somebody come in. We also gave people an extra week of PTO so that they had even a sniffle, they could stay home and not worry about it. Then also I always forget how to say that. That's available as well. Me to death. So I'm hyper vigilant because I ended up sending home 3/4 of our staff, and we were down for a week and a half simply because I sent everyone home. Said, don't come back until you've had a test that's negative and you've isolated for 10 days. I just wasn't going to mess around with it and take any chances for the rest of the employees.
Yeah, and similar sanitation practices at Harris Seed, certainly the temperature check. We also actually have some serious electrostatic sanitation machinery that goes on in our warehouse in the evenings that goes over key areas such as fulfillment and packaging that has higher foot traffic, of course, than the office section. We run UV lights as well in the call center and actually throughout the entire building. And then we actually just developed, or we just enabled touchless pickup order options for our customers. We have a locker system that's in a designated part of our building, because we don't have necessarily a retail center in the front of our store, but we've always given the options to local customers for pickup. And so now we have a touchless option as well for customers who are nervous about it, but certainly very strict mask policy, very strict hand washing policy. And yeah, shifts and certainly starting people out in those key foot traffic areas as much as possible.
Found those things to be really helpful. We found some good portable, high quality Hepa filtration systems that have UV lights in them that circulate air and clean air in those high traffic areas, break rooms. We actually brought in extra portable bathrooms to have outside the facility so that any of the common spaces would not have the normal traffic that they would if we're running under normal conditions.
Marissa brought up the blog that we did. We've actually done 2 blogs, so that's why I switched over my screen sharing. This was one of them, the SeedFacts for informed buyers. And so this one is the one that talks about reputable seed companies and everything. And then it has a how to read a seed packet. So that's one of them. And then based on the questions we got after posting that, we did a second blog where we answered a lot of those questions. So that information is up there and available if anybody wants to share it or share a link to it or anything like that. Let's see here. Unless anybody has something else to add, there was a question about how long will it take for some of the out of stock items to be replenished? That might be pretty specific, but that was another question we had.
Well, I can speak to that. We've been running out of products, running out of packages of seeds. We're trying to keep track of them closely so that we fill before they run out. But of those that do run out before we get a chance to refill them, it usually takes 3 to 5 days to get them refilled and back on the shelf.
And then from the production side on our end, if we're sold out on something, it could be 9 months, a couple months until the next crop comes in. But the way things are cycling, some crops can come in quite frequently because they're being produced in multiple production sites. So it could be 3 months, it could be 9 months, it could be a year. It just all depends on the crop and where it's being produced or how often it's being produced.
And I think to both Nathan and Janine's point, it really depends on that particular circumstance of that sold out versus even a back order situation. You know, obviously the best case scenario is if we run out of the finished good, we still have bulk in the building. And then certainly that's a much faster put up and we can fulfill that much quicker than we ran out of our bulk seed. And now we have to actually, you know, contact the breeder. And as Janine was just saying, if they happen to have it on the shelves, great. But if they happen to not have it on the shelves, that's when it really turns into what would be a back order into, you know, more than likely a sold out situation where we're actually, you know, doing refunds. But it can be a varying degree. And as Diane, you pointed out, you know, we invest a lot, you know, as far as our back order messaging on our website to be very particular. If it actually lists a date, like a promise date, that means that we have some inkling from our breeder as to what date we were given. And we have kind of follow-up procedures to make it. If it just simply says on back order, that could mean it went on back order that day and we're doing our due diligence to contact the breeder to find out if we can get more seed. But yeah, that's why our suggestion, our call center always directs customers to actually view that messaging, because that's going to be as specific as we know at that particular time.
Anyone else want to jump in on that topic?
In our circumstance at Johnny's, most of the things that we're showing is out of stock right now. We actually have seed in our facility, but the sell-through was so quick, we still need to replenish it back and get some more packed up. So, you know, like I mentioned before, we have about 136 varieties out of the 2,000 we carry that we don't necessarily anticipate getting back in stock, and it may be something that we have to wait on the next production cycle to get some. For the others, similar to has been mentioned, you know, it could be that it gets back in stock tomorrow or 3 or 4 or 5 days from now. We've tried to adjust our back order notification just because we found that as much as we think we can predict the velocity at which we can pack up to meet the existing demand or something's going to be received in, it hasn't been quite as accurate and predictable as it was, honestly, a year ago at this time. So we've tried to be careful about not more recently having dates that don't come to fruition. I think that's probably the most frustrating thing for customers. And in some cases, we've shown things as out of stock and not taken back orders on them so that we don't split up a customer shipment, you know, send out half of their stuff today. And then after a pack job goes through, send out the other half of their order, you know, a week from now. That creates a confusing internal situation. I think a confusing experience for the customer too.
So I'm not, I know this is a seed discussion, but how many of you sell live plants, and what has that experience been like last year and thus far this year?
I can at least speak to, we broker for live plants as well. I think Nathan might have actually spoken to it earlier, but the demand was just as much as it was for seed. And of course, because we broker for the live plant, that's actually that next level of now we're actually facilitating with the growers. And they're obviously seeing the increase in demand, and they obviously have the labor issues that, you know, we all have as well. Yeah, I guess to the short question, or the short answer would be there's still a lot of demand there. And it really just depends on grower by grower, whether or not they can, you know, handle that level of demand and have labor constraints themselves.
So live plants get pretty tricky when we're trying to send those out. And the biggest issue, probably our biggest issue, is that we're in central Wisconsin and the weather in our location is not conducive to sending out plants early. Right now we're shipping out roses because the roses can handle a little bit of cold weather out to places like California, Texas, and Florida, stuff like that. But we don't start sending out most of our plants until we get into March. And really, April is the month we send out most of our stuff. So you have this issue where we're collecting orders from Christmas through the end of March and then trying to get everything out the door in April. Typically, it's really crazy in April, and this year it's just going to be crazier. We have, like I said, even more orders than we typically do. We're going to try and stay on top of it as much as possible, but with issues of labor and everything else, we're trying to get creative to get as much stuff out the door in as timely a manner as possible. But with live goods, it throws in that extra issue of, okay, it has to be weather conducive to be able to ship it out.
That demand for live plants, at least at the stores I service, also flowed into Christmas trees. The stores that I service, they were gone in days from Christmas trees, and they couldn't get any more.
And even as we talked earlier, we specifically do bare root live goods, which adds another fun level when you're dealing with all the millions of new gardeners. Nothing quite disappoints a home gardener than getting a bare root product. We learned the hard way. So again, we've put a lot of effort into the educational side of bare root live plants. Making sure that our growers can support the volumes. We've had quite a few people turn off orders earlier than usual, just because they are really anticipating this kind of crazy April, and they want to make sure they can fulfill the orders they already received.
I would like to reiterate that when I service one of my stores in Longmont, Colorado, people will come up to me as I'm servicing the display and say, I heard there are going to be seed shortages. Are there going to be seed shortages? So it's a question I have to think hard about when I answer.
Which is exactly why we wanted to do this webinar. And we specifically invited a lot of garden communicators because they're the way that we can get the word out. So yeah, we knew that that was a question that's on everybody's mind. So, and that kind of leads me to my last set of questions here in the last 10 or 15 minutes is, what tips can you give consumers? It is a period of high demand, no doubt about that. So as the direct contact, as a retail seed distributor, company, e-commerce company, website, what kind of advice would you give to consumers?
That's a really tough one, because you don't want to say, yeah, you need to get your seed now because we're going to run out, because then they're going to start hoarding it. And I've seen hoarding cases at the store, quite a few of them. So you kind of have to balance it between that and there's going to be no problem, because there is a problem. There are going to be varieties you're not going to have. There are going to be varieties when you sell to a retail store, there are varieties that people specifically come in there for, and some of them you're just not going to have. So you got to balance what you tell people carefully.
I would suggest that they do turn their orders in early, be patient, expect some out of stocks, and if there is a variety that you want, you might have to substitute with a different orange carrot other than the one that you're used to. So just be flexible with which varieties you have within a category.
That was very close to what I was going to say. The other thing that I'll put in there is order early, not so much because we're going to run out, but because demand is going to pick up. We're going to hit March and April and demand's going to pick up, and then the orders are going to go out the door a little more slowly. Right now, we're slightly behind, catching up. Once we get to March and April, we're going to be behind probably throughout, not behind as in we're not going to get the stuff out the door to you, but you might order and it might take 2 weeks to get the stuff out the door instead of 5 days or 3 days.
As far as retail stores also, I'm finding that people really are coming in early because they've heard it on national news that there are going to be shortages. So a lot of our retail stores are a third to a half, again, increased over what they did last year at this point. So there's definitely, people are pretty aware that they need to get their seed.
Yeah, and I think just to echo the points, I think it's really key. I'm sure I don't speak just alone for Harris, but we post on our website what our average turnaround time is. We post what, our current call center, return rate is. the key is just to be patient. We have, people go into the sense of panic when they place an order, and then they try calling us and they try emailing us, they try contacting us on Facebook, and all of a sudden you're now just clogging all the communication channels. And if you really just take a look at a website and see a company's average turnaround time is 3 to 5 days, you've received an order confirmation, you can bet in 3 to 5 days you'll be receiving a shipment confirmation as well. So our best is, leave those communication channels open when there is a problem. If you do get an order and there's an issue with it, or you do, have a question because that time has now passed and you want to ensure, but definitely reaching out and looking at the resources at hand will ensure that we can get to everyone.
Another issue we've had, though, is we've been good about getting orders out really promptly, but then USPS is 2 weeks behind. And again, we need patience, because on our end we've got it out the door really rapidly, but then the shipping is taking longer than expected. I think they're catching up. I think after that Christmas push, they've gotten a little bit better, but.
Well, and then FedEx just had to close their distribution facilities because of weather. So anything that went FedEx was delayed at least a few days. I sent something overnight about a week ago and it still isn't there. So the whole chain has issues.
Well, I'm personally excited that new gardeners are coming into the marketplace, and they're very, very excited. I shared this picture of this seed stash with Diane from one of our local Hollister garden groups. And someone asked this lady how big her garden was, and she said it was half an acre. And so this is more seed than I have for my 5-acre trial ground. So I think the enthusiasm is there. It's great. The lady also commented that she had $200 sitting in a shopping cart somewhere, and she needed to whittle it down to $100. So it's just like the enthusiasm is just so great out there. And I think this is really, really a boon for our industry and people getting interested in gardening again. I'm wondering if it's kind of like a situation where you go to the grocery store and you're hungry and you're excited to garden in this case, and you just don't know how much seed, how far it'll go in your small space or your big space for that matter. But I think the psychology of the consumer as they get into gardening would be very interesting to study, is about what is driving them to get to this point as this lady has with her stash, as opposed to buying what you think you're going to need for the one season. So it's an interesting consumer out there right now.
I've heard several people say that garden seed is the toilet paper of last year.
I think it's even more than that, though. I think it's also satisfying an emotional need. People have been frightened. People have been stressed. They have been disappointed by everything that they see going on around them. They're stuck at home. They're dealing with a lot of technology to work remotely. How lovely to go outside and plant a seed and watch it germinate. It's just so good for the soul. And I'm happy to see so many people get engaged with gardening, because I just think it's really good for the country emotionally to see that sort of interest.
I think I think people were also scared of the fact when the grocery stores had issues. I think a lot of them thought, well, I'll grow my own food. Well, we know it's a little more difficult than that, but they wanted to get started on it. They realized that what they had depended on in the past wasn't necessarily going to be there, and that maybe they had to diversify a bit.
And one of the things that I've talked about when, I'm on a radio show or something and people are saying, well, what kind of advice do you have? And my point is, and I think somebody kind of alluded to it, is if you order a packet of a specific variety of tomato and there's 25 seeds and you're like me and you have a small suburban plot, start sharing. You can share some seeds this year. And gardeners are really good about sharing advice, and they, divide their perennials and share. So I think right now a good time to share some seed also. And I did see that somebody had mentioned a seed library. So I wanted to see real quick, we've got a few minutes left, if anybody had some tips on seed sharing as far as, making sure everything is labeled, making sure it's clean. Do you guys have any tips along those lines?
Well, you're talking to people that make a living by selling their seed packets, so that's kind of a tough question.
But I guess, Diane, to your point, like proper seed storage, like this photo that Janine shared, keeping it in a cool, dark place, making sure it's not exposed to water, high humidity, that will enable you to share it with, a few different people. And then, yeah, certainly you're going to want to label it, because there's nothing more disappointing than planting something one year and realizing you love it and then not realizing what variety it was. So, certainly, even though we're in the business of seeds, a lot of us sell hard goods supplies and different things. So make sure you get your garden stakes and your garden markers and even just the supplies needed, germination, heat mats and light stands. So.
Along with proper labeling, it's probably a good idea too to put a date. A lot of seeds will last 3 to 5 years, 7 years, but there are a number of things too that only last 1 or 2 years. You'll have to kind of know what those are. Onions just don't carry well over the years. Their germination rate declines really rapidly, and you're going to want to use fresh seed every year. Lettuce is another one, probably better with fresh seed. So you'll have to learn, but we have to learn all the time too, what will hold and what has good germination rates. Oh, here are my dogs.
We allow dogs here. One of the things I did that was kind of fun is we have these, in the neighborhood I live in, we have these little stands in front of houses where you can have library books. When the pandemic hit, you started seeing piles of toilet paper and stuff like that on them, which was really nice. But I went around and put some seed packets in them just for the fun of it to see how it worked. And yeah, they were gone first. They were actually gone before the toilet paper. And I commonly introduce myself as one of the owners of a toilet paper company.
It's just encouraging for me, Diane, to see the variety of, that they have in this lot here. I mean, just to try something new and take recommendations from the retailers. And if you can't find your first choice, maybe there's another one that you can substitute. And it'll be perfectly acceptable. And you may even like it more.
That's right. Try something new. Be open to substitutions. So in our last minute, does anybody have any closing comments? I think we got to the majority of the questions that related to our topic, but if anybody else has any closing comments, you can shout them out now.
I think, as Nathan said, even though demand has been so high already and people have been placing orders early, we all are anticipating even crazier spikes this coming March and April. So I know I speak for not just my company, but on behalf of a lot of us. I mean, we are prepared. We are as prepared as we can be. But we don't have any intention of shutting off our website. We have no intention of turning down any orders. All that we really ask is that you can be patient with us, and we will do our best to make sure that we get the seeds delivered, in the time frame that you need to sow them. We've had plenty of managers. We've been working 7 days a week since last year. We have managers who come in on Saturdays and Sundays. We have people who stay in our building as late as 9, 10 o'clock at night and later. So we have full commitment to our customers, growers, home gardeners, to make sure that they get the products that they're seeking.
I would suggest to consumers, don't hoard, because if you don't, there'll probably be plenty of seed, even if you have to substitute another variety. We have some retail stores we have to be careful of. For example, maybe 2 years ago, they ordered $500 worth of seed. And then last year they ordered $20,000 worth of seed. And we're like, that might not be quite as much seed as you really want to carry in your store right now. So I don't think there's any need for hoarding.
Yeah, we've been getting orders out rapidly, and I just want to welcome all the new gardeners that are coming on and learning how to garden and grow their own food. I think this is a really good time to grow your own food. And we're here to help with the education piece as well, so that you can learn how to do that.
Just like to say thank you for putting this on and letting us get some of this information out to some of the consumers, because it's a lot of different factors that I think all of us in this industry are feeling right now, and just trying to do the best that we can to serve our customers has been difficult.
I don't know if this is possible, but I would suggest that if someone wants some of our contact information so they can ask us questions directly, that they could get it, because there may be questions they still have that they didn't get answered that we'd be happy to answer personally.
So what I will do, if it's okay with all the panelists, you can let me know if it's not, but this is being recorded and I'm going to put it on our YouTube channel. So I will send that link out to everybody who's registered. And then I will also send our panelists contact information out in that email. So that will go out hopefully by the end of today. If not, it'll be tomorrow. Great. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everybody who attended. It's been very, very informative. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dan.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to gardening.
Thank you.